welcome to the Juneteenth Tribute and Celebration Program with Naila Malik and Janae Brown. Today, American descendants of slaves remember the end of chattel slavery with the Juneteenth holiday. It is a time of remembrance of the struggles and sacrifices our ancestors endured. We are here today because they chose to survive. Today's program marks the first time in a long time that Black librarians of the Los Angeles Public Library have collaborated on a Juneteenth program. We hope you learned something and enjoy our presentation. 2.5 years after President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, the slaves in Texas finally learned about their liberation. To give context, all military branches are given orders to memorize and live by. On June 19, 1865, Major General Gordon Granger issued the following order known as General Order Number 3. It states, "The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, quote, all slaves are free," end quote. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired labor. The freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. They are informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts and that they will not be supported in idleness, either there or elsewhere.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am one of two librarians today who will present to you a sampling of the African American experience. We will take you on an excursion that will include reading several children's books, sharing historical notes on 3 branches of the Los Angeles Public Library, and we will introduce to some and recall to others the mbira, a time-honored indigenous African instrument. Our program will begin with highlighting the Washington Irving Branch Library. Washington Irving is one of 72 branches that comprises the Los Angeles Public Library system. The library is an agency of the city of Los Angeles. The branch manager of Washington Irving is Marcy Jones. Ms. Jones is one of 5 African American librarians in the Los Angeles Public Library system who holds the position of branch manager. Located 1 block east of Crenshaw on Washington Boulevard, the Washington Irving branch is home to the Miriam Matthews Collection, a special collection of adult and teen level fiction and nonfiction titles by African American authors. This special collection was created in honor of Miriam Matthews to preserve the memory of her trailblazing role as the first African American librarian in the state of California. Ms. Matthews was also the first African American to be hired by the city of Los Angeles. Miriam Matthews successfully passed the civil service exam and began her tenure as a City of Los Angeles librarian in 1927.
Naila Malik read the first book selection for our Juneteenth program. A native of Los Angeles, Naila has amassed 32 years of dedicated service as a librarian for the Los Angeles Public Library. She has served as a young adult librarian, was appointed as coordinator of a state-funded literacy program called Families for Reading, and she is currently the children's librarian at the Washington Irving branch. Ms. Malik is also a talented multicultural storyteller, motivational speaker, and contributing author to the New York Times bestseller Chicken Soup for the Teenage Soul. It is with honor and pleasure to welcome to the center stage my colleague, Naila Malik.
Thank you, Janine. At this time, I will read the first book in our presentation today, an award-winning book entitled Ada Twist, Scientist by Andrea Beatty and illustrated by David Roberts. Let's see if I can get a position for everyone to enjoy. Ada Marie. Ada Marie. Ada Marie said not a word till the day she turned 3. She learned how to climb and made her big break with a trail of chaos left in her wake. She ran through the day, chasing each sound and sight, and didn't slow down till she conked out at night. Her parents were frazzled, but tried not to freak as Ada grew bigger and still did not speak. Clearly, young Ada, with lots in her head, would have something to say when it ought to be said. That's just what happened when Ada turned 3. She tore through the house on a fact-finding spree and climbed up the clock just as high as she could. Ada's chin quivered, but she did not cry. She took a deep breath and simply asked, why? Why doesn't it tick? And why does it talk? Why don't we call it a granddaughter clock? Why are there 3 pointing to a roll? Why are there hairs up inside your nose? She started with why, and then what, how, and when. By bedtime, she came back to why once again. She drifted to sleep as her dazed parents smiled at the curious thoughts of their curious child who wanted to know what the world was all about. They kissed her and whispered, "You'll figure it out." Her parents kept up with their high-flying kid, whose questions and chaos both grew as she did. Even Miss Greer found her. There she is with her parents. Let's see. Yeah, that's it. Even Miss Greer found her hands quite full when young Ada's chaos wreaked havoc at school. But this much was clear about Miss Ada Twist. She had all the traits of a great scientist. Ada was busy. That first day of spring, testing the sounds that make mockingbirds sing, when a horrible stench whacked her right in the nose, a pungent aroma that curled up her cold. Zowie! The source of that terrible stinking. How does a nose know there's something to smell? And does it still stink there's no nose to tell? She rattled off questions and tapped on her chin. She started and stopped where she ought to begin. She started at the start where she ought to begin. A mystery, a riddle, a puzzle, a quest. This was the moment that Ada loved best. Ada did research to learn all she could of smelling and smells, both stinky and good. One hypothesis Ada thought would be true. The terrible stink came from Daddy's cabbage stew. She tested and tested, but soon Ada knew it was time to come up with hypothesis 2. Then zowie! The stink struck again, just like that. Hypothesis 2. It's caused by the cat. It's caused by the cat. It needed perfume and some fancy cologne. So young Ada tested. The test was a flop. She started again, but her parents yelled, "Stop!" Ada Marie, to the thinking chair now. By the time we count 3. Enough, said her mother. That's it, said her dad. Her parents were frustrated, frazzled, and mad. Why? asked Ada questioned. Her mother said no. Her father said, go. You've ruined our supper. You've made the cat stink. Enough with your questions. Now sit down and think. She looked at her parents. Her heart turned to goo. Poor Ada Twist didn't know what to do. She sat all alone by herself in the hall. And Ada, once more, could say nothing at all. And so Ada sat and sat and sat. And she thought about science and Stu and the cat and how her experiments made such a big mess. Does it have to be so? Is that part of success? Are messes a problem? And while she was thinking, what was the source of that terrible stinking? Ada Marie did what scientists do. She asked a small question, and then she asked two. And each of those led her to three questions more. And some of those questions resulted in four. As Ada got thinking, she really dug in. She scribbled her questions and tapped on her chin. She started at why and then what, how, and when. At the end of the hall, she reached why once again. Her parents calmed down and they came back to talk. They looked at the hallway and just had to gawk. No patch of bare paint could be seen on the wall. The thinking chair now was a great thinking wall. They watched their young daughter and sighed as they did. What would they do with this curious kid who wanted to know what the world was all about? They smiled and whispered, "We'll figure it out." And that's what they did, because that's what you do when your kid has a passion and heart that is true. They remade their world. Now they're all in the act and helping young Ada sort fiction from fact. And as for that smell, what can Ada Twist do but learn all she can with her friends in grade 2? Will they discover the stink that curls toes? Well, that is the question. And someday, who knows? Ada Twist Science. Thank you.
The children's book Ada Twist may be borrowed from LA Public Library once we reopen. In the meantime, you are invited to visit our webpage and go to Overdrive, provided in the electronic resources, to download a copy. A book list with all the selections included in today's program will be shared in the chat box.
The opening remarks for our program were made by my colleague, Janae Brown. At this time, I would like to formally introduce her to you. A native of Los Angeles, Janae Grisham Brown, MLS, UCLA, began her career at LA Public Library as a children's librarian serving at the Angeles Mesa branch. and now has more than 22 years of library management experience. She is the principal librarian of the Engagement and Outreach Department, which provides system-wide oversight of community and volunteer engagement. Janae enjoys managing teams and seeing projects to fruition. She is past president of the California Librarians Black Caucus, Greater Los Angeles chapter, former Coretta Scott King Book Awards executive book member, and past board member of the Los Angeles Association of Black Personnel. Janae earned the Joyce Matkin Sumby Emerging Leaders Award in 2015 from the California Librarians Black Caucus. She is a PLA, Public Library Association Leadership Academy alumna. Under her leadership, LAPL's Read While You Wait Books in Barbershops program and its Diversity and Inclusion Apprenticeship, a career development program that recruits students from diverse backgrounds to the librarian profession, launched. She is proud to stand on the shoulders of pioneer librarians who came before her. Now it is my distinct pleasure to welcome my colleague, Janae Brown.
Thank you, Naila. Now a branch history lesson. This brings us to the Vernon Branch Library. The Vernon Branch is located on the corner of Central Avenue and 45th Street. The surrounding area of the Vernon Branch was for several decades the heart of the city, where mass numbers of African Americans from the southern states relocated to Los Angeles and settled. This period in history is known as the Great Migration. The Vernon Branch was renamed in honor of Leon H. Washington Jr. in 1975. Mr. Washington was a local activist journalist and the first publisher of the LA-based seminal African-American newspaper, the LA Sentinel, the Los Angeles Sentinel. Mr. Washington's published reports encourage readers to fight against discrimination and racism. One of the unique features of the Vernon Branch was the establishment of the Black History Collection under the tenure of Miriam Matthews, branch librarian from 1834 to 1944. Recognized as an important asset to the community, this outstanding collection of Black history and literature has grown throughout the years, with each succeeding branch administrator. The successors of Miriam Matthews to serve as manager of the Vernon Branch include the following African American librarians: Hortense Woods, Rosetta Taylor Warren, and Brenda Hicks. In 1971, the history collection was named for Dorothy Vina Johnson, a native Angelino who taught in the Los Angeles City Schools over 40 years and was the principal of the Garden Gate High School when she retired in 1963.
And now for a brief history of the Watts Branch Library. which is another noteworthy achievement from the archives of the African American experience in Los Angeles to be brought to the forefront. On June 25th, 1996, the Los Angeles City Council voted to name the Watts branch the Alma Reeves Woods Watts Branch Library. Miss Woods had been active in the community, encouraging literacy and library uses since the 1950s. From a Los Angeles Times article dated June 23rd, 1996, we are able to learn more about stalwart supporter of the Watts branch, Miss Alma Woods. Therein, we discover that this community activist learned to read in segregated Arkansas during the 1920s from her grandmother. In an interview in 1996, Miss Wood said, quote, "I've always felt that education is life," end of quote. This extraordinary woman of humble beginnings was speaking while seated in her home and surrounded by some of her favorite books, The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, Terry McMillan's Waiting to Exhale, and Paul Laurence Dunbar's poetry.
We wear the mask. We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding hearts we smile. And mouth with myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but oh, great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet and long the mile. But let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask. By Paul Laurence Dunbar, 1872 to 1906.
We invite the audience to peruse the Los Angeles Public Library's Black Lives Matter essential reading, which appears on the screen now.
It's a great collection of books. Now, I would like to invite Naila Malik back to the stage for a retelling of a John the Conqueror folktale.
Thank you, Janae. Now, during the slavery period, one set of stories have emerged and have still are popular today, or at least they are remembered to this day. And that is the collection of the Brer Rabbit tales. But there are also other stories that were very common during the slavery period and familiar to the slave people. But I'm going to introduce you to one that's not so popular. And it comes from the collection of stories that fall under the umbrella of High John the Conqueror tales. Now, the tales that they shared about High John were not the kind that people would say in open space. They waited until they were in hushed scenarios, when they were at home back in the shanties, and no longer working in the fields and the cotton, picking cotton or anything. When the Black folk were comfortable in their own surrounding with their own families and friends, they would open up and they would share stories like this one, High John the Conqueror. Now, it just so happened this particular time, the Freedom Bell had just rang and the Emancipation Proclamation had just been signed. And so John was one of the first to hightail away from the plantation. He was ready and he was anxious to be a free man. And so he set out on the road and he was walking and walking and he was contemplating the new future. So he had to travel about 5 days before he reached a location that had some promise for him. He stood outside of this town. He was standing on a hillside and he could look down at all the bustling energy. He saw people going and coming, all this traffic, this foot traffic. He saw people on horses and he saw wagons and cows, and all the stores were filled and people were buying and shopping. And he said, I declare this is exactly where I'm going to settle down. So he went into the town and then he started strolling around, casually looking around to see more. And he said, I'm bound to find me a job here. And just as he was thinking about that, a constable walked up to him. Now, a constable was a police. And this police came right up to John and insisted that he had stolen something. And for that, he was heading to jail. John couldn't believe this. He was being falsely accused. He had only smelled the sweet flower of freedom for about 5 days, and now he had to have such bad luck so soon. And so he tried to convince the constable that he had made a mistake. It had to be a mistaken identity case. He didn't go any further than that to tell the constable that he was lying or anything, because he knew even though he was free, he was still Black, and a Black man could not dare tell a white man that he was lying, even if he was, as in this case. Well, nothing he said persuaded the constable to change his mind, and so he snatched him up and he dragged him down to the jailhouse and put him inside a cell. As he was locking the cell, the constable told him he would appear in court the next day. Boy, he didn't know what to do. And so time passed real fast. And the next day he knew there he was in the courtroom. He had been brought in along with 2 white men who was also prisoners and accused of crimes. Well, they put the white men on the extreme side of the courtroom, and they had him to sit by himself on the opposite side. So there John was propped down in a chair. And while he was seated, he kept picking at his brain, trying to figure out as best he could of how he could get out of this terrible mess. He knew he was doomed for an awful outcome. If he didn't get time in prison, he was going to be subjected to long years of hard labor. Oh no, he didn't want any one of those alternatives for his future. All of a sudden, it dawned on him. A story he learned when he was a little lad. He was taught this story by his mother, and this story began to blossom in his head. And he said, maybe there's a clue in this particular story as to what I can do. It was about a swan, and it was about a duck, and they were in the water, and the duck swam away from the swan, and she was imitating the gracefulness. And she was so preoccupied of trying to copy the swan until she ran into a fox along the edge of the pond. And she didn't see him. And he pounced at her and said, "Uh-huh, I got you now. And I'm going to break your neck and I'm going to eat you for dinner." And she pleaded for her life. And then she remembered something. She said, "Oh, no, you don't. You can't do that to me, Mr. Fox. Didn't you hear? This is freedom time. Why, now I'm protected and I have as much right as you to be here under the law." And so they went back and forth, volleying about that point. And finally, she suggested, "Well, we can just go to court and you'll find out for sure that I am just as free as you." So they went down to the courthouse. And when they got there, she looked around and she saw the constable, who was a fox. She looked on the other side and she saw a group of lawyers huddled together, all foxes. She heard the door open and she looked ahead of her, and here was the judge entering the room, the courtroom, and he was a big fox. She heard people filing in, and she looked up into the balcony, and oh my goodness, all the witnesses were coming in, and everybody who came in were foxes. So then finally, she and the fox got a chance to plead their case. She went first. She pointed out that it was a new day and that she was free just as much as the fox was. And then the fox explained his side. And when they both got through, the judge slammed the gavel down and he declared, he said, "Fox, you go ahead. You still have the right to snap her neck and eat her up." And that was the last of the little duck. Well, that particular story didn't help much High John in his situation. And he started feeling more scared than before. But he had to figure out something still. He didn't give up. And so the court got underway. The trials got underway. And so the first man was brought before the judge. He stood before him, and the judge looked down at him and said, "It says here that you stole a cow. How do you plead?" And the man looked up at the judge and he said, "No, sir, Your Honor. Why, I had that cow ever since it was a little bitty calf." And the judge took the gavel, pow, slammed it down and said, "Case dismissed." The next man was brought up before the judge. He stood before the bench. And then the judge looked him up and down and he told him, "It says here you stole a cow." And the man said, "No, sir, Your Honor. Why, I had that cow ever since it was a little calf." Judge took the gavel again, slammed it down, and said, "Case dismissed." Now it was John's turn. John come walking up to the front of the courtroom on real wiggly legs. He could barely make one step after the other. When he stood before the bench, he started squeezing onto his hat as tight as he could. And then the judge looked him up and down real slowly like, and then he said, "Boy, I see here where you stole the wagon. How do you plead?" And John nervously looked up at the judge and he said, "No, sir, Your Honor. Why, I had that wagon ever since it was a wheelbarrow." Judge looked down and laughed. He started laughing. Everybody else in the courtroom joined him. And then he slammed that gavel down again. Pow! Case dismissed. Now, that is an example of how High John knew how to think fast in bad situations. And back then, they would call that striking a straight lick with a crooked stick. John was able to walk out of that court a free man. And High John in court.
Bravo, Naila.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeanette. Now I will share notes about the music that we've been hearing that has been streaming throughout today's program.
Just a second, Naila. We're going to read The Undefeated, if you can introduce me.
Oh, certainly, by all means. I will invite my colleague back to present a reading of the children's book, The Undefeated. It's an award-winning book by Kwame Alexander with illustrations by award-winning artist Kadir Nelson. Please proceed.
The Undefeated. This is for the unforgettable, the swift and sweet ones who hurdled history and opened a world of possible. The ones who survived America by any means necessary. And the ones who didn't. This is for the undeniable, the ones who scored with chains on one hand and faith in the other. This is for the unflappable, the sophisticated ones who box adversity and tackle vision, who shine their light for the world to see and don't stop till the break of dawn. This is for the unafraid, the audacious ones who carried the red, white, and weary blues on the battlefield to save an imperfect union. The righteous marching ones who sang, "We shall not be moved," because Black lives matter. This is for the unspeakable. This is for the unspeakable. This is for the unspeakable. This is for the unlimited, unstoppable ones, the dreamers and doers who swim across the big sea of our imagination and show us the majestic shores of the promised land. The Wilma Rudolphs, the Muhammad Alis, the Althea Gibsons, the Jesse Owens, the Jordans and the LeBrons, the Serenas and the Cheryls, the Reese Whitleys and the undiscovered. This is for the unbelievable, the we real cool ones. This is for the unbending, the Black as the night is beautiful ones. This is for the underdogs and the uncertain, the unspoken, but no longer untitled. This is for the undefeated. This is for you and you and you. This is for us. The Undefeated was a 2020 Coretta Scott King Illustrator Award-winning title, as well as a Caldecott Award winner in 2020. Naila will now share history notes on the mbira instrument and its legacy of importance to the African continent.
Born in the heart of the African continent more than 3,000 years ago, the mbira is a mutant percussion instrument having spread according to migratory routes, genres, and eras. It remains very dear to musicians and is a hugely popular musical instrument in Zimbabwe. According to historical notes, oral and in print, the mbira first appeared on the West African coast in wood or bamboo. The mbira, also called the kalimba, and is also referred to as the thumb piano because it is played with the thumbs and one finger. This African instrument, known for its recognizable tranquil melody and power to produce a calming effect on listeners, was seen as a symbol of resistance during the era of the slave trade and was forced underground. Yet captured slaves insisted on its companionship. And as a migratory instrument, the mbira followed the pathways of slavery to Latin America and Jamaica. Perhaps the highest praise bestowed upon the mbira comes from Cameroonian musician Francis Bebey. He has said, quote, "The mbira is the instrument that succeeds in annihilating the boredom felt by the Creator himself. It is the instrument that gives life to the world, to people and things," end of quote. An African continent original, the mbira. Portions of this information, the aforementioned information, was provided from the article entitled "Discover the Mbira, A Brief History," written by Jean McCall of QWEST TV.
Thank you, Naila. In the next segment, we will take a glimpse at the Reconstruction era. The Reconstruction period spanned nearly 12 years from December 1865 to March 1877. For the 3.9 million newly emancipated African Americans, they entered the Reconstruction filled with hope, anticipating the dawning of a new day, a much better life than that which they had shed and shredded. Instead, these millions of recently unshackled people would come to discover the Reconstruction period was a mere mirage and but the shining of a short-lived beacon of light. Now, our final reading for today's program will be brought to you jointly by Janae Brown and Naila Malik. Our children can soar. Naila, you ready?
Momentarily. Yes. Let's proceed with the presentation of Our Children Can Soar.
Okay. Our children can soar. Subtitle?
A celebration of Rosa, Barack, and the Pioneers of Change by Michelle Cook.
Our ancestors fought.
So George could invent.
George invented.
So Jesse could sprint.
Jesse sprinted.
So Hattie could star.
Hattie starred.
So Ella could sing.
Ella sang.
So Jackie could score.
Jackie scored.
So Rosa could sit.
Rosa sat.
So Ruby could learn.
Ruby learned.
So Martin could march.
Martin marched.
So Thurgood could rule.
Thurgood ruled.
So Barack could run.
Barack ran.
So our children can soar.
And higher.
And higher.
And faster.
And faster.
And stronger they go.
And stronger they go. Yes.
Yes.
Love supreme, 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 love supreme.
Thank you for joining us today for our Juneteenth presentation, sponsored by the Los Angeles Public Library.
At this time, we would be happy to engage the audience in a question and answer session. Thank you to everyone that joined us today. Thank you for the comments letting us know that you enjoyed the program. We appreciate you being here and participating with us. Have a jubilant Juneteenth celebration.